there have been tensions between the East and West. A lot of it focuses around Gregory of Palamas, which is why we keep mentioning him, because he kind of developed through utilizing the Jesus prayer, a movement called Hesychasm, and in the West you had a Thomistic theologian named Balaam, Balaam,
who was a monk.
Yep, who opposed Palamas. So you kind of had this far less familial conversation taking place back then than the one we're having now,
right?
Between Balaam and Palamas, stating that, you're in schism because of this reason, you're in schism because of this reason, your understanding of prayer is flawed. The West accused the East through, Palamas's theology of quietism, which is, of course, a heresy, because they would sit and their manner of just sitting around and meditating in order to attempt to achieve that deeper union with the Lord was perceived as something other than what the Eastern Christians of the time would identify it as. They would say, well, we have there's these uncreated energies of God. You might have these encounters with a divine light, and which again, St. Thomas Aquinas mentions the divine light when speaking about St. Paul's experience. He mentions what's called the lumen gloriae, which is like this medium through which one may encounter God directly. There's a lot of debate among theologians about what that is, how that works,
right?
And unfortunately, because of a lack of agreement on terminology back then, they basically anathematized each other, East and West,
right.
And they said, and Balaam would say, you're talking about these energies of God. That doesn't square up with Aquinas' understanding of God as being simple. You can't have, basically he saw it as a challenge to the understanding of God's essence itself, that you can't have this simple essence, but then these energies that are acting, that sometimes may be active and sometimes may not be active. There might be a little potency there.
Right. And just to give, credit to St. Palamas, or if you want to call him St. Gregory of Palamas, right? There's debate, of course.
Yeah.
But he may have been misunderstood by Balaam.
I think that's the case.
And
John Paul II does too.
There you go. Because, there's a heretical group that he was equating, possibly, again, we can have this discussion more in the future, but a heretical group that was being equated, right? That he was referring to, but was that group actually the Eastern Orthodox Church at the time? Well, I don't think it can be, because Palamas spent time Constantinople, if you want to call it the council or synod in the 14th century of Constantinople there, actually refuting that heretical group, right?
Right.
And again, being a monk on Mount Athos, he spent time making sure that the Orthodox teaching was orthodox, right? Was clean of any heresy, and that was a heresy at the time. We don't have to get into all that right now. That's not the topic of discussion. But what we do want to point out is let's give Pope St. John Paul II some trust there, and maybe look further into the topic.
And just to clarify what we're talking about there, John Paul II, during his pontificate, really wanted to bridge any tensions between the East and the West, and really kind of have a ressourcement, bring things together. And that's where you see his writings about, the importance of breathing with both lungs of the church, right? We have two lungs to breathe, and you want to tap into both sets of spiritualities, if you will, because we're encompassing, even though it's 1% of all Catholics currently in the current landscape, you're still talking about maybe 16 million souls. And,
right. Right.
And
And
there's
we want
so
to
many
breathe.
different
The
traditions
body
there.
is going to function at its peak when it's breathing with both lungs.
Right.
And there may have been issues in both East and West because of the separation, lack of understanding, and then different spiritualities develop because there isn't this cohesion anymore.
Absolutely.
Right. And so St. Gregory of Palamas basically distinguishing the energies and the essence of God. One can actually say that wouldn't go against the simplicity of God simply because you have to make distinctions between the three persons of the Trinity, right? There are three distinct persons, yet they remain one nature, right?
Absolutely.
And so, he goes into depth about how the energies of God are actually God acting outside of himself, and how God acts within himself and outside in himself. And even if he didn't create the universe, he's still acting in that fashion, right? And these energies we see them in the Church Fathers, St. Basil the Great, being distinguished, right? Saying that we can have access to God's energies and know them, but then we can't know his essence, right?
Right.
And so it's as if his energies are attainable, but his essence is unattainable.
And St. Thomas Aquinas would say that in a very rare instance, when experiencing God through this lumen gloriae, that it is possible to experience the very essence of God itself, even in this life. And yet somehow that mysteriously does not violate, obviously, the scriptural realities that state no one can see God and live. Right? We'll have to dedicate an episode or maybe many on just the Trinity itself. It's funny how we come back to conversation on the Trinity because it's the most challenging conversation for anyone to have. It's what stumps theologians through and through, and it's where kind of the breakdown between the East and the West all came from in the first place.
Clause. But I mean, Catechism of the Catholic Church, chapter paragraph 234 actually mentions how the Holy Trinity is the central mystery of the Christian faith. And again, there's so many topics. Theology is an ocean. We'll never, explore all of it before we die.